This is your guys' group. We are here for you. So if you guys have anything pulling at your heart, if you have anything that you feel like you want to bring up, discuss, even if it's not on the topic, we are open to it. We are here to serve you guys and deliver what we can do to help you um, have a better life, restore, support and trust and connection with your family. So please don't hesitate to ask. With that being said, is there anything? Hi, Madeline. Is there anything that you want to bring up or ask or discuss or get support from the group?
Well, I have something I'd like to ask. Jeb and I live in Florida. Monday next week, I'm going to Utah to visit our son, and just kind of some guidelines or structure for what types of things we should do together, shouldn't do together. What's appropriate.
Are you asking me or just the group?
Everybody, you okay. Too. I mean, like you had explained to me, like don't take him shopping. Take him for activities or events or hikes and things like that. So I'm going to be mindful of that.
Okay. And again, I think you can take him shopping. I think it's always where your heart is, right? Okay. Like, is he manipulating? Like, this is for anybody. Are they trying to get something that they can do themselves? Right? Okay. Meaning like, hey, well, honey, whatever you call your son, right? Like, if you were just better at budgeting, like this is something you got to learn. So, right. So like, I can't keep supporting bad behavior in a sense. And I don't mean you have to say bad, like but like something that's not working in your life, I don't want to keep supporting that because it keeps re-emphasizing like I will always be there to take care of you. And like I want you, and this is good. This is communication. Like so, I want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and you want that, right? Like you're 30 some years old. You want to be able to handle your life and do what you want with your life, and this is part of it. But I always think it's important to, hey Mark, to see somebody's perspective, and we'll get there tonight. Like it's always important to go like to put their shoes on, and look at like why would you not want to do it for them? Where like I can do all these things for my wife, yeah. Like if it's gonna steal some of her like self-worth, because every time we do something for somebody that they can do for themselves, we take a risk of stealing part of their worth. Because then, especially like when they're first starting to do it, they think like, well, like, see, I can't do it. Somebody else has to do it for me. And then you get that memory replayed over and over, and you build that belief over and over. Does that make sense, Cheryl? That's what I want to stay away from.
Okay.
And if he's like, hey, buy me these things, that's where I say like, don't do that, because he's just trying to get you to do things for him that he could do himself, but he was bad with managing his money, and he needs to learn from that lesson. And now I just talked this whole time and nobody else got to say anything. So now I'm gonna open it up for everybody else.
I would just say maybe go out to a movie or something that kind of, takes him away from, or, gives him a little break from the routine. Maybe something like that. Maybe there's some really great museums in Salt Lake City. If either of you are into that sort of thing, there's some really good ones.
He mentioned bowling. I guess there's a bowling alley nearby.
There definitely is.
Okay.
And this is also a great opportunity. Oh, Cammie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I would go ahead. The only thing I was thinking is like, bowling is a good idea if that's something he enjoys doing, something that you guys can enjoy doing together. My first thought was how chaotic life gets in addiction or any type of sickness or illness. So places that you can be present, like going to the park and let him show you places that maybe in Salt Lake you haven't seen for a while, or where you can actually have conversation and there's not so many people and so much chaos that it takes away from you guys being present together.
Love that.
He did want to go hiking, so
love that. And there's beautiful hikes here. You'll love it. Everything right now is so green, and I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And if he's virtue, you just leave him up on the top of the hill, you know?
Yeah, it's a little hillier than Florida, though.
Yeah, there's a few more hills there. Does anybody else have any, you know, insights that they want to share? Okay, I think experiences, especially for people that are new in sobriety, getting out of the house, experiences, things that can like show them they can still have fun without the drugs. Because I most certainly didn't know if I could survive hours without drugs, let alone days, let alone years, and let alone have fun without drugs. So I think it's important to make sure that that's part of your time here. And that you guys, like, I love what Cammie said, I love what Stacy said, right? Like, get them out doing something that's just way different than what they're normally doing in this everyday life that they're doing right now. Okay. I think those are great things. Okay, thank you, Cheryl, for bringing that up. If anybody else has any, do you have any more questions, Cheryl, or do you have any want to follow up with any of that people brought to the table?
No, I did want to do things that you know, would be accessible to him in the future. Like museums is a great idea because they're not a huge entry fee. You know, he mentioned he's a skateboarder, and he said there's a skate park he'd like to go to that's a little farther away than he would normally be able to access. Says, well, why don't we go to two of them? One that you could go to, and one, you know, it's a little farther away, so you can have both experiences.
It's a great idea. I like the way you all are thinking. And I like the keeping it low cost too, so he doesn't have to think that the only way to have fun is spend a bunch of money. Because as we all know, that can get us in financial trouble quickly until we learn how to handle our finances. Okay. I will get the presentations up here. Thank you again for everybody. There may be a little learning curve for me on here, so just give me time and grace, and I think I'll be able to figure this out. I think I'll be able to figure it out. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We will, so communication and conflict resolution. This kind of ties into some of the stuff we talked about last week. I think this is a good way to move forward, and a good way, especially when you guys are spending more and more time with your loved ones. They have more free time. They're calling you more. This is a good thing to go over. So again, conflict resolution, I think this is so important to start to understand how we communicate back and forth, right? Do we tend to feel like we're getting backed in a corner, we're being manipulated, do we want to escape, do we want to fight, do we want to just give up and give in, right? Because sometimes that's an easy thing to do, like I'm just tired of fighting, so I just want to give up and give in, or give them what they want. And how we start to understand how to compromise. Is there anything that you all have that you go like, man, this is a tool I use, and it doesn't matter if you think like, oh, this isn't a good tool, or it is a good tool. Just we want to share tools with each other. What are things you all do right now in your own marriage, in your own life, to help like resolve conflict?
I think sometimes if you hit the pause button, so sometimes you may be trying something and there may be good intent on both sides, but for whatever reason, you're not able to resolve it. And so you're not really giving up, you're just hitting the pause button.
Jim, I love that.
And agree to resume it at the conversation at another time.
See, I think that is a challenge for me with my wife. But I think when we can pause and come back, does anybody know the world famous show, How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah.
If you don't, you guys are missing a classic. Let me tell you.
We watched
But-
that 10 years ago. We watched every episode.
yeah, that's about when it came out. But I loved in one of the couples on the show, during any argument, they could just say pause, and they would like let everything go, just find love together again, and then eventually they would say unpause, and then they resolve the conflict. But I just thought that rung true to me, Jeb. What other skills do we have to resolve conflict that we know of already that we use?
Well, I think you want to avoid the shoulds, you know, telling people you should do this, you should do that. And if you can put it in terms of I think this, or this is what I think, that sort of tends to kind of help a bit. I mean, because basically you're expressing an opinion, you're not necessarily the definitive source of all knowledge. So,
Would you mind telling me your name?
Chuck.
Chuck. Okay. You're new to the group, yes?
I'm with Stacy. I was here the first week and not last week, and now I'm back.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you, Chuck. I assumed you were with Stacy. If not, you guys are really friendly for being strangers, you know? So
Yeah, well, we shared.
Chuck, I love that. Like staying away from shoulds, staying away from those type of words are powerful, and using the I statements of I feel even is a great way instead of like this is the way it is. So I like that. What else?
It's something that I have come to learn that I need to really focus on and pay attention to is my tone. Just recently, I had a discussion with my loved one, my son, and he really took offense to my approach to what he was showing me, and I apologized immediately. That said, you know, that wasn't my intention. I'm sorry, you know, if I made you feel that way. And he said, well, your tone speaks volumes. So, and I've heard that from other people too. So that's something that, is a tough one because it's sort of part of who you are, you know. But tone can really sabotage.
That's brilliant. I love and Stacy, I'm with you. My wife doesn't always love my tone, and that's challenging, you know. So I agree, it's very difficult. I think though, when we're talking about communication, even, you know, about 55% of human communication is body language, like how you stand, how you sit, right? Like, are you dominating the conversation? And then, you know, about 35% is tonality. So I think that is a huge thing in communication. And then the other 10% that we all think is so important is words, which words certainly create a story or a picture for the person listening to it. Yet the tonality, the pitch, the pace, and the body language are huge. So thank you for sharing that. What else do we have?
Asking questions instead of making statements.
It's another great one. Okay.
So if you have a point to get across, you can frame that as a question of like, well, what do you think of this? Or if I said this to you, you know, or if someone did this, you know, how would you feel if?
Yeah. Why do you think that's so important, Jeff?
Because then someone doesn't feel like you're talking at them, that or down to them or lecturing them. It's more of a conversation where you're actually seeking their input, and it sort of allows you to allow someone if you're trying to make a point with someone, you know, that old saying that men are best convinced by reasons they themselves discover, right? And so you can help someone, you know, get to the point that you're trying to make without feeling like that you we're lecturing them, you're likely to have more success.
Well said. I think that is so profoundly true. Like if we can help ask them a question, it helps them it helps them actually feel in control of the conversation, of the decision. And like you said, when we can ask them, we can help direct them, but they're still in full control of like, do I accept the question? I get to give the answer instead of somebody else telling me. So I think there's true power in that. It's a great one. Does anybody else have any ones that they want to bring up? I think these are all wonderful.
Well, Chuck and I have this little running joke now since I'm not sure what show it came from or what, but mansplaining. In our conversations, there's sometimes a bit of mansplaining going on. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's, the man explaining to the woman or whoever, how it is or how it should be or whatever. And, we make a joke out of it now, and Chuck realizes and catches himself when he's doing it. But it's a, sort of a superiority in knowledge, I know and you don't, or let me tell you about it.
I think that's a huge one. I think it's very difficult when we see somebody else having a really hard time continuing to fail at things, and that we feel like we do know better, right? We do feel like we have the answer, so we just want to mansplain or just tell them the way it is. I think that's very difficult, especially as parents, to not do that, because in a sense that's what you kind of do when they're little kids, and then they become adults, and we have to switch our flow on how we communicate as well, because they're no longer kids, they're adults. So I think that's a really powerful one. Thank you for sharing that.
I do.
Okay. Do we have any other ones? These are all wonderful.
I was just informed. I'm not familiar with mansplaining. I was just informed that I do it. So.
Well, Jeb, you're a man. Of course you do it. We do. I will send you videos of me doing it.
A lot of baseball analogies.
You have to use a baseball analogy or it makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? I use sports analogies too, and my wife says, "What does that even mean?" I said, "Well, I know that. Let me mansplain to you what that means."
Exactly.
That's how you get them.
Good thing.
Okay, Cammie, do you have anything you want to throw out there? Adam, Mark?
Oh man, I think that they were all really, really great. I mean, every single one of them I can relate to. I think one of the bigger ones for me right now is asking questions. I think when you get curious about that emotion, instead of, you make me feel, or you're so defensive, it's like, help me understand where this defense is coming from. Help me understand what I did or what I said that is making you feel this way. Like I try and use help me understand. And I also think at the very beginning, he mentioned pause. I think when you're so elevated in those emotions, oftentimes it's like, okay, this is important, but we're both too upset right now to get any points across. So once you're exhausted from that emotion and you're able to reconnect when you're both at a place of calm, I think that there's a lot more to be accomplished there.
Love that. It's a great one. I think, like you said, when you are able to ask questions, it also really helps when somebody else is heightened emotionally, right? Like when you go like, hey, because now you're seeking to understand and seeing them and validating them in a sense by wondering what they're going through and what's happening, than just trying to argue back or tell them they're wrong or have another kind of conversation. So I love that. Okay. If anybody has anything else, we will be on this for the next 30 minutes, so feel free to shout them out. So this slide is really important because we want to understand like where, right? We all want to understand at the base where we're getting started from, right? Where the base of where they're getting started from, where we're getting started from. And where do we fall in one of these 4 quadrants? That's really the question to ask. Are we the competer? Are we the avoider? And I'm going to say we're probably all these at some point in our life, or some point in the conversation, or some point in this discussion we're having right now. We can all relate to all these. But are we like the accommodator, right? Or are we the like collaborator? And I think some of the things you guys talked about before that you brought up even put us in one of these 4 boxes. So you can raise your hand, you can say nothing, that's okay. If you don't want to say anything, you can say like where you fall, or where you lie most of the time, or we can just give this as information and say that, especially I feel like people that have had a lot of trauma, that come from a lot of like verbal abuse or verbal aggression, they tend to be less assertive. They become the appeaser. And I want to make sure that we, as the family members, as well as the person on the side getting recovery, learns how to use and own their voice in a healthy way. Because that's the key, right? Is we can say anything to anybody as long as our heart's in the right place, and as long as we are caring about it, right? Like I can say to somebody like, hey, you're not doing a great job, if I'm coming with love. But if I'm coming with anger and assertiveness, no matter what I say, or that tonality of anger and assertiveness, people will reject that. But if I come with assertive love, people will connect with that.
So am I correct in assuming that the optimal square here is the top right northwest or northeast quadrant?
What do you guys all think? It's a great question, Jeff.
And the reason I ask that is I think that one of the things that I've learned, sometimes, you're trying to work on some of these things that we just talked about, in terms of your approach and how you want to handle something, and you have sort of a goal in mind, and depending on your frame of reference and what kind of day you had, or like where your mind is, sometimes you're not in the best frame of mind to have that interaction. So I think it's worthwhile to think about that in terms of kind of when you tee up those interactions, because you could be you could be in a variety of different spots, mentally or emotionally, even physically tired, that could impact on what you think you want your approach to be and how you execute that.
That's a big statement, Jeb. That is a huge statement of having self-awareness and checking in. And we'll get to it in a little bit, but boundaries, like is that person in a like, are they hungry? Are they tired? Right? Like going back to even some of the HALT stuff, like maybe they're just feeling lonely and they're just getting upset, right? So I think it is so important to have that self check-in. And that's sometimes easier than others for myself. But when I can even just tell my wife, like, hey, I'm not even annoyed at you. I just feel annoyed right now. I don't know why, right? Because sometimes we don't know why, where that heightened emotion's coming from. But when we can admit it and share it with others, at least now we have an opportunity to either seek understanding or just go like, okay, thanks for letting me know. I think that self-awareness side is huge, though.
Yeah, I think on the collaborating piece of it, it's going to be so much more successful if both parties believe that we're working together toward some goal, or just working together. In the other quadrants, there's a me and a you, but in with collaboration, if you can really both understand and believe that you're working together towards something, then it's going to be a lot more successful and probably fewer conflicts.
That was well said, Stacy. You want to teach the group? Go ahead. I'm gonna let you. I'll just click forward in the slot. No, I love that. That was brilliantly said.
I was a school teacher. What can I say? Yeah.
It's still working. Keep it up. Maybe you want to go back into school. You know, I'm sure those kids could learn something from you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. So it seems like everybody's loving the collaboration square. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about these 4 squares or the 5th one in the middle that says compromising?
Well, I think, when your loved one is using whatever their problem is, a lot of these things are very difficult to do. So I tended towards kind of avoidance or accommodation, perhaps, because there wasn't really any collaboration to be done at that point, because there's no, it's a one way honest conversation. The other way is not honest. So to me, I always, had this feeling that, you can't help but feel like you're somehow responsible for this problem, right? And so you want to avoid doing anything that you think or perceive may have caused it in the first place, like being an overbearing father or whatever, So,
You're worried about making it work.
Yeah, you worry about making it worse even at the time, especially when they're in the midst of what they're doing, But when they're sober and clean, it's you can actually move more towards the collaborating part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that is definitely true.
Yeah.
I think
sometimes also when you said like there were times that you would avoid, I think that's safe. I mean, if our person is active in addiction and there's conflict, sometimes the safest route is to avoid that situation until maybe they have some sleep and some food and they're able, when there's a conflict, when 2 people come together to resolve, then there's an endpoint, there's a goal. But when only one person is there, sometimes avoiding keeps it safe, or accommodating to just make it stop. So I don't think that those are bad things. I think that when they're active in addiction, sometimes it has to be the safest route. But if there was a specific conflict that you wanted to work towards together, they definitely need to be in a clear headspace and both be on the same page that you want to resolve at that point.
So as I was saying a little bit earlier, right, adopting an assertive communication, as long as it's with love in your heart, like we all need to be seen, heard, and validated in our lives. Yet if we go back and we're always living in avoidance or accommodating, we're never sharing. And of course somebody will just keep taking if they don't even know like how to give. So if we can get into that compromising, collaborating section, we can really start to own our voice and use our voice. And like Chuck said, like Cami said, there's reasons that we fall into all 4 of those boxes. None of these I don't want any of us to look at like this is bad or this is negative. There's reasons for all of them. And we can start to tap into like why is the reason we fell into those. And then how do we act differently now with a person that, like Chuck said, that is sober? Because hopefully if you're working with our program, the person that we know is sober and the person that you know is sober. So this is the perfect opportunity to start to practice different. And we'll get to the other slides here in a second. But I just think it's so important for us to, as it says, improve self-esteem and improve the conversation with each other by being more lovingly, kindly assertive, meaning and loving ourselves by saying like, hey, what I have to say and feel is valid as well, not just what they feel. Okay, conflict resolution, the best circle, right? Everybody agrees? Okay. So I think I'm going to go back to what Stacy said because I think it was so profound and so powerful. The first one is over on the right-hand side. It says identify problem. This is so important for us to remember. And like I said, Stacy already said it. It's not a me thing. It's not a you thing. It's a we thing. So when I have a conversation with my wife and we start a discussion of like, why'd you do that? Right now, she's a problem, or she says to me like, now I'm the problem. And I want us to do our best to remember that neither of us are the problem. There's a problem or a conflict or a challenge. And I like the word challenge personally because I like to take on challenges that we can overcome together because it's a we thing. So if we can let go of like, hey, this person is the problem because they're the addict, let's just say, really the person wasn't the problem, like the drugs or how they coped with things were the problem, right? So when we can look at it and go like, that's the challenge. Like, how do we help them cope? How do we help them understand themselves better? How do we help them not do drugs? When we look at the challenge of the thing opposed to the person, it now becomes a we thing. And that's so profoundly important for us to, if we just started every conversation in our life with family members, with loved ones, with coworkers, with that, like, hey, you are not the problem. I'm not the problem. Yet there is a solution and there is a challenge we faced. And we can face that challenge and find the solution together. Right. And again, I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but this is something fun you can do. So there's something called the Romeo and Juliet effect. And it is when you have your young daughter or your young man dating somebody, and then you go like, I don't like the person you're dating. So Romeo and Juliet, right? So if you're now the family battling or the world's battling you, they tend to bond closer together. So I'm going to reverse engineer that and go like, when we can look at the problem and go like, that's the world pushing on us, how do we team together and become Romeo, not obviously, I know it's a different relationship, but Romeo and Juliet in this argument to find a solution to the challenge that we're both facing. And I think there's truly profound power in that. The next one, and again, just jump in if you guys have anything you want to say. Does anybody want to say anything about what I just rambled off about? Stacy, you made this happen. So, you know, if nobody liked it, it's my fault. And if everybody loved it, it's Stacy's fault. So, so I think another one is identifying feelings. And this goes back to really what Jeb was saying. Like, you guys are already nailing all this stuff tonight. So I hope you guys are excellent communicators because it seems like you are. Identifying feelings. First, it says associated with conflict. But it could, like Jeb said, you could be carrying something in from the day. You could be carrying something in from the night before, right? Like, we are human beings. So how do we identify what the feelings are and where they're coming from? Because that's going to start to control the impact and the impact on how it's playing on us right now in the conversation, how it plays in before the conversation and after the conversation. So if we can really narrow in on the identifying the problem as the problem, not the person, and then the feelings around the problem, it helps us. And as Cammie and a few other people said, like, if we can seek to ask questions and start to understand right here, right in this level, like, why is this a problem? Like, why are we feeling this way? Why are we, and if we go back to last week, why are we triggered, right? Why are these triggering these negative feelings? And we can start to understand that. We get quickly through the circle, right? It says, decide, right? Do you want to resolve it? And I think that's a good question. That's where I think Jeb brings in that pause. Like, do we want to resolve this, right? Is there something to resolve, right? Like, if I'm just feeling angry and I'm not angry at my wife, I'm not angry at anything, and I can't figure it out, like, there's not much to resolve. There is. And I can accept that now and start to work through my anger and figure out where it came from. But there's not much to resolve. And then, like, she could feel like I'm upset with her. So if we again seek to understand, we start to ask questions, we start to understand where the emotions come from, we can decide to resolve it, pause there, we can work through the resolution. But really, if we do these first 3-4 steps really effectively, we get to the conflict resolved much quicker. We get to the seeing, hearing, and validating each other much quicker. And a lot of this goes away and it finds that we are now again having vulnerability and connecting instead of being opposed to opposing, people in their castles going to war with each other. What is your thoughts?
So this slide really hits home with me right now, because I feel like I'm at a place where we hit pause, and that's good, I believe. But independently, I'm not sure whether it's, whether we need to resolve this conflict or not. It was a verbal, sort of sparring, and his response, in my opinion, was kind of over the top, and I didn't want to own that. But it was also at a place where I felt like we needed to pause, because it could have gotten, really ridiculous or unproductive. So, but I feel like we're kind of still there, and I don't know if it's bothering him, but it's bothering me. So, and I've been, trying to decide, okay, is this important to me to bring it up to him and ask him, are we good, or should I just let it go and, move on?
Are you open to feedback from the group with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. What do you guys all think? It's a great example.
One thing that came up for me when I saw this slide in relation to what you said is identify the problem. There's so much shame in addiction that oftentimes the person that is suffering thinks they're the problem, or maybe you think they're the problem, but the problem is the substance use or the behavior, not necessarily the person. So like identifying the problem that's happening takes shame away from who they are or what they're doing, or identify the way you feel about what has happened as opposed to how you feel about them being the problem. So I think that, I don't know your son and or your situation, and if it's something that could be an easy conversation, like, hey, this was just kind of sitting on my chest, and, for me, I don't know if it needs to be resolved, but if it does for you, you could ask him if he's open to discussing it, or if it's something that's kind of gone away. Sometimes I don't realize till later some of the things that I said that may have been hurtful. And then once I realize them, I'm like, dang, I was really out of line there. But then so much time has passed, it's difficult to be like, hey, remember that one conversation we had and I was out of line? But there's a lot of freedom and liberation in that, in owning your part of things, I guess. I don't know.
Great input. Who else has some input? Or does anybody else have any input?
Well, I would say that I've as I've thought about our guy, and the identifying the problem part, I've gone back and forth on that in the last handful of time, and I is the problem because he can't stay sober, or is the problem because he's 35 years old and has not figured out adulthood yet, and he still thinks and acts like a middle schooler sometimes, and he hasn't figured out how to make good decisions for himself. And I don't know, because when you think about like solving the problem is those two problems. I think they're different solutions, right? And it's we've struggled with that, going back and forth, and because it appears that like a couple times in the past handful of years, we thought we had the problem solved if he, if he stayed sober, but that really didn't,
wasn't the only solution.
Yeah, and so it's I think it's complicated when you think about identifying the problem, because it sometimes it's that's a hard one. That's the first thing. But sometimes that's hard to pinpoint, right? And so when you start thinking about working through this little tree here, you end up going in a bunch of different directions. And I think that's what's made it frustrating for us, is that, and I think the point we're at now is that okay, there's more than one problem, right? And so, but they have to be examined and thought about in terms of a solution together, kind of concurrently, right? And so recognizing the complexity sometimes is sometimes it's a challenge. And I think this manifests in a number of different ways. I think in work problems and other relationship problems, you run into the same kind of thing, that you've got multiple things going on. And so that's why it's, and sometimes you have to think about the feelings and, some of the impacts. You may have to get a little bit farther down the tree and then go back to, how you think about the problem.
Yeah, I think the red arrow probably needs to loop back and go back to identify problems.
Definitely good.
It's a little more circular than it appears.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial, and you guys can all ponder this, and then text me later about how wrong I am. I don't think drugs are ever the problem. They're actually a coping skill that somebody learned, right?
I don't disagree at all.
Oh, you don't? Okay, great. Well then, Jeb, you're on my team. Welcome to Team Tribe. Crazy. Welcome to it. We're all here.
But it is a problem.
Sure.
Because not adult behavior, and it's not going to get that person where they want. So it is a problem.
Yeah, it became a problem.
The problem.
Yeah, because it was a coping skill for them to however they handle their emotions, or whatever trauma or whatever things have come up in their life, their fear, they use it to cover up. Right. And the question is, how do we help them start to see different? And I want to go back, and I want you to finish anything you have to say, Joe.
No, that was, you just said it more succinctly and perhaps more eloquently, but yeah.
Because Jeb was mansplaining.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, Jeb, thank you for mansplaining. I needed that.
Well,
Second of all,
getting ready to pull out a baseball analogy. But he does want to start on third base sometimes.
Yeah, there you go. I love that. I've heard that a few times from you. I love it. The other thing, Stacey, I want to go back to you. So there's two quotes that I'm going to give you, and I'd still love to touch more on what you're saying tonight or any other night. So there's a guy named Orrin Woodward, and one thing that's always stuck with me, he said, like, if you have a conversation with somebody, like, a heightened conversation, and you think about it more than twice, it is your responsibility to bring that up to that person. So since I heard that, I've always taken that on. And then, this is going to I'm going to tie it in. But Abraham Lincoln says, saw a man walking to because he was a lawyer at one point, he saw a man walking to his office, and he looked through the window and he goes like, ooh, I don't like that man. And he said, like, I better get to know him better. And I think when we don't like something about somebody, when we can see them as the human instead of the problem or the thing we don't like, I'll title the thing I don't like the problem. We can see the human being, and we can actually get curious about it, Because I think if you are feeling like still some conflict inside, or if you're wondering like why he got heightened, when we can get curious about it, there's healing in that. And at least if nothing else, like you don't have to agree, but I think it's important to understand, right? Like I tell my wife this all the time, like when we have disagreements, we don't have to agree. Yet I think it's truly important to understand each other's perspective. And if you do nothing else with your son, I think there would be huge value in that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll move to our last slide. And I know,
I disagree with you, Chris. I do disagree with you about your premise, though. I'm sorry.
It. No, don't be sorry.
I think that there's some people that seem to have a predilection to becoming addicted, and it seems to have a physiological component, unless I've missed something along many years of examining this.
Okay.
And what tends to happen to me, it seems to me, is that they get stuck at the point when they become an addict, whatever their drug of choice is, and they never grow up much past that point, because from then on it's just this game where they're playing. So that's how you end up with the what I kind of term a man child, if it's a young man, where he's still sort of never grew up and is just able to escape that, But I do think that the drug and alcohol is a huge part of the problem, and I don't see that it can be just dismissed as a behavioral issue, because I don't know that everyone came into it with some trauma that caused them to take drugs. It was more like they just had some friends who said, "Hey, try this," and boom. And in the case of like people that seem to have a predilection to alcoholism, it's like, wow, that triggered something in their brain. And the people that have a predilection to other drugs, it seems to have tripped something there. And then after they're deep down the hole, they've drained all the reserves out of their brain and they have nothing to plug in those receptors, So I don't know. That's my take on it. But
Chuck, I love it. You do know. Like you just said it very eloquently.
I've had a lot of years to be studying, unfortunately.
I love it. This is great. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't ever have any problem with conflict. That's how we learn, right? Like I'm taking in what you're saying, and I think we probably agree a lot more than like perhaps we think we disagree. Because I'm definitely not saying that there's not like alcoholism. There's people that get addicted to things. My thing is just we focus usually for even people that come in to addiction treatment, even if they've never had any trauma, there's some sort of shame and guilt, meaning like, look, like, I don't know if you ever heard of big T, little t, and I don't want to get too much into that and like how we define that, but just like, even if you started to drink and do drugs, there is some little t trauma that comes from that, shame and guilt that comes from that ties people into it. And that's the true essence of the thing we have to help them solve and heal, or they will go back to the drug even if they get sober. Is that fair to say?
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll go from there, and then next week we'll bring some boxing gloves and we'll really get at it. You'll probably beat me up, so I won't bring the boxing gloves, but I'll bring a pillow. We'll have there's pillow championship fights, so we can bring pillows and we can have a pillow fight. That's fun. Okay.
No,
Thank you,
we
Chuck.
need to resolve our conflicts.
Yes. Thank you, Chuck, though. I love it. I really do. And I hope everybody knows that, like, please bring anything that you agree, disagree. Like, this is how we learn and get better. This is how we refine. Like, you may say something, I may go like, I completely disagree. And that's okay. Again, we don't have to agree. I want to understand, though, at least. And that was a great example of it. Thank you, Chuck. So I know we only have I know we're a couple minutes over. If everybody's okay, I'd love to just discuss this slide and we can, spend as much time or a little time as we need on it. But this is so profound, and it says how to talk to someone with addiction. And I will say, I'm going to take off the addiction, how to talk to someone, because I think this is so important, right? Like helping them find support within you or within somebody else, right? That's the reason they have therapy. That's the reason you have coaches in the world, because sometimes it's hard to find that support with the loved one. So it's so important for you to be able to have them go, or yourself go and reflect off somebody else, like we're doing tonight. Like we have however many people, 10, me, you guys, all in here together, like challenging each other, questioning our thoughts, but yes, also being kind and accepting. Right. And I think that we talked about the boundaries last week. And I will say the thing I will say about this picture is I don't think the boundaries is a line with toe to toe. I think it is an open, putting my hand on your shoulder and saying, hey, I can't do this right now, because it doesn't, like, if we go back to the avoidance square and the collaboration compromise, like, I can't do this right now because I don't feel safe. I can't do this right now because I'm falling back into the old ways that I needed, and I need to go pause and clear myself. I need to seek understanding, right? So I think the boundaries thing is really shoulder to shoulder. We're in this battle together. I think one of the things I really liked was being consistent and listening more than you speak. But I think being consistent is so profound to me, because we all know the story of like the light wolf and the dark wolf. And whatever one you feed more, you get more of. So if we can be consistent with that heart, with that being kind, with accepting, with loving, it helps that shame and guilt be felt and processed and let go of. And that white wolf grows. But if we keep emphasizing the dark wolf, if we keep reacting the way we used to, same on their end, it just rekindles that dark wolf. And we want to feed that white wolf. What is anybody's thoughts on this slide, or any insight that you've had from tonight? Any ahas you want to take away from tonight, or you want to share with the group?
Well, I think I found that as we kind of latest round of therapy and counseling, we're being more honest about, we're learning more about what was going on, what the person, the addict, thinks, what triggers them and stuff. And so having kind of very real conversations about it, painful as they might be, it's useful and get in, to, if they are willing to reveal a bit of, what was going on. I think them to reflect a little bit more, on what their situation is. And it helped us to understand more all of those things little by little, because you never quite know what's going on with the person when they're in the middle of screwing up royally, So.
I just want to say, great session. I felt like it really is absolutely getting to the not only teaching us and reminding us, but it's dead on, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all of you, because you made a great discussion. And Stacy, thank you for going into the battle with love armor on, and having these hard conversations, because this is where the growth is, right? When the rubber hits the road, that's where the growth comes from, not from hiding from it, not from trying to shy away from it, but having these kind of conversations and having people like this group to support you. So I appreciate it. What else does anybody have they want to share?
I would just close it. When we learn to really be consistent with setting boundaries, that was a big step, because it was hard to sometimes just hang up. But that was preceded by several conversations of, all right, if you're going to talk like this, if that's how you're going to, we're not going to tolerate this. So I'm happy to have a conversation if you're going to be civil, but otherwise, I'm not going to talk anymore, and then and hang up. And gradually that sunk in. It's like, all right, they're serious. And that was, that was a really, really effective tool in communication to, and it took a little bit to get comfortable doing that. Like, you weren't just slamming the door in someone's face. You weren't, you weren't being unloving. It just, that's what you needed to do to take care of yourself. And if you didn't take care of yourself, you certainly weren't going to be in a position to help someone else. So that was a big lesson for us.
Love that, Jeb. I think it's definitely about loving yourself. right? That you put the boundary up and go like, hey, I can't talk to you. I can't put me loving you in front of me loving myself. Thank you, Chip. Okay, everybody, I really appreciate everybody joining. I appreciate everybody moving their way over from Zoom to this new platform. This is where hopefully we plan to stay. This will be additional, there's chats on here. So if you need support throughout the week, you can come on here, you can chat, you can ask a question, you'll get feedback like we did tonight, but you'll get it in real time because other people will jump on. There will also be additional resources that we'll be putting up here. Some of the stuff we cover, some of the stuff where you guys are like, hey, we're missing, we would like this that could be covered. We'll either do it in a group or we'll build a video out that you guys can go watch. And then you can comment below and we can start a conversation chain that way. So there will be a lot more to come, but we appreciate everybody moving over. Again, if you guys have any questions, concerns, and you go like, hey, we should do a group on this, please email me. I'm happy to take those in and create a list so we can keep making this better and build this out for everybody. If nothing else, I appreciate you all showing up. I hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you next week.